it's a whole different world now than when it was back then. When we started the practice, I sold everything. I mean, we handed in our 401k, whatever we could. We went to the bank and asked for whatever we could get just to start the practice. So we started from literally negative to where we are now. It was stressful, but it's a matter of once you set the processes in place and you have your system and you do good work, things should work out. And as long as you're a hard worker, things usually do work out.
When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast. Thank you for tuning into episode 65 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snellings Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. My guest today is the owner of Groth Law Firm, Jon Groth. Jon grew up in Milwaukee, graduated from Marquette Law School in 2000, and has worked in Wisconsin litigation and personal injury law exclusively since. Jon knows the value of hard work and what it means to understand his clients and their needs. That ultimately brought him from clerking in law school, where he discovered his knack for legal problem solving, to owning his firm with an elite team of lawyers and paralegals. Jon, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Boy, that's an impressive kind of synopsis. I hope I can live up to it. Boy.
You know what? That is probably one of the shorter intros that I've done. I usually get about halfway through and I start seeing the guests like waving me off on the red. Like, no, it's too long. Let's just get started.
Yeah.
All right, Jon. So you are one of the good guys. You're a personal injury lawyer. On the plaintiff side, we represent victims. We help people. You are not a black hat, as we like to say. So was being a personal injury lawyer always in your future?
That's a question that I get a lot from our law clerks. They always ask me, what was your journey? And the answer is no. Being a personal injury lawyer wasn't really something I planned to do in law school. When I went to law school, my thought was that I would be like maybe a district attorney, doing prosecutions for the state. In Wisconsin, DAs are elected, and I was a poli-sci major, so I kind of put those two together was my thought. And then I had a criminal law class that set me straight, and I realized I wasn't going to do it, and that was not me. And then I clerked for a law firm in Chicago that was a pretty decent-sized personal injury law firm. Really impressive law firm, very well run, and it was tons of fun. I was there for a couple summers and got there, drove an hour in the morning to be the first one in the parking lot. So when the partners got there, they would see me, hopefully to impress them. I don't think I impressed them too much because they didn't offer me a job, which is fine. But I got to sit all day and listen to people talk about what concerns they had and problems that they were trying to get fixed, and then I would have the way we worked is we were a lot of either briefing or intake. And when I was on my intake days, I just listened all day with a headset on and listen to people's problems and write down facts and go to the partners and talk to them about what the fact scenarios were and whether it was a case or not, and then talk to investigators about investigating and signing up those clients. They were part of a nationwide network of a TV advertiser. So I don't know if you remember Sokolov Law in Massachusetts, I think is the guy.
I know that name.
So back then, Sokolov had all these ads, and so we would get just tons and tons of phone calls from people with all kinds of problems. So that was fun because I like the strategy of trying to help people and see, okay, is it X or Y strategy, and asking questions and learning, well, okay, you should tweak that question to ask this because that's going to figure out whether it's this law or that law or what have you. So it was much more of a chess game that I enjoyed, and that's what kind of sent me down the path of civil law. And I took a bunch of trial advocacy classes and such in law school, and got to where I am now.
Isn't that so interesting? Coming from not really inside a PI background, but going into a PI firm and listening to those intake calls. I think most people have the perception, probably from the billboards and the advertisements, that, oh, you're a car crash lawyer. Maybe you handle some trucking, maybe you handle some bicycles or motorcycles or whatever. But the breadth of personal injuries that occur is astounding. I mean, on any given day, we'll have people call in. I mean, of course, there's the car wrecks and truck wrecks and motorcycle crashes and things like that. But there's injuries that occur, on apartments. We've had balcony collapse cases. We've had things falling on people. And then you name it, we've probably had a call on it. And a lot of them are just, quite frankly, crazy stories that you hear. And it's absolutely amazing. Most people would probably be very entertained to just sit there and listen to a week's worth of intake calls with the crazy scenarios that we hear on a daily basis.
I think that should be a podcast. I think that would be a winner. Having just, we can take out people's names and just have those stories be, told. There's cases that, lawyers get bad names for bringing cases that maybe other people might think are questionable based on not knowing all the facts. I've had some situations, some clients who are really seriously injured from some crazy scenarios. I had a client who was sitting on the toilet at a casino, and the casino had these oversized toilet paper dispensers. And I remember that call coming in. This is 20 some years ago now. And she was sitting there doing what she has to do, and this big toilet paper dispenser fell off the wall and hit her in the head. She wasn't expecting it, and when that hit her on the head, she flung her head back and had a herniated disc in her spine. I mean, what are the chances of that? And she had immediate pain, immediate problems. Ambulance came, took her, but that's a story that, people would say, oh, that's just a lawyer. It's the hot coffee story or whatever else.
Right.
They were injured. They're trying to fleece the casino, but it was a real deal and a real injury, kind of somewhat unbelievable. But certainly after you investigate it and look into it, it's like, well, no, this is totally believable. They didn't keep track of the maintenance of it. They used improper screws to put the device on the wall. There were all these things that led it to just be a ticking time bomb that it was going to fall on somebody at some point. And sadly, my client was, there at the wrong time at the wrong place. So those are the kind of stories that I never thought, as a 1L in law school, however many in 1997, that I would get that call and then handle that case almost all the way to trial. We settled that case a week before the trial. Fascinating stuff.
It's absolutely amazing. And two, people see those verdicts come out and they're like, what? The McDonald's case is always the go-to. But it happens, monthly, weekly. We see all of the stuff on the Trial Lawyers Association of all the different verdicts that come down and whatnot. And when people ask me about that, how are these people bringing these kinds of cases? These are so frivolous. I was like, well, hold on. If you were sitting in that jury room, would you award a single dollar to a case that you thought was frivolous? I'm like, no. Okay, how many people do you know that would? He goes, well, nobody. Well, clearly the lawyers are just fantastic, at fleecing people over. And I was like, hey, I feel like we're pretty good trial lawyers. I would never be able to fleece over a jury on something like that, right? People have common sense. There's rules of evidence. There's things that we're just simply not allowed to do. And in Texas, it's just getting tighter and tighter. And so, I think most people, it goes back to your point of you're not hearing all the facts of the case. You're not seeing the evidence. You're not hearing the testimony. And that makes a huge difference because the vast majority of people, I don't care where they're coming from, are not going to get fleeced. Nobody wants to be interviewed on a verdict where they rendered a ridiculous number and then they can't justify it.
Yeah. Well, and and there's defense attorneys, and before before it goes to trial, before there's an attorney, there's an investigator, or there's an adjuster, I guess I'll say, somebody who is trying to minimize the damages. So there are plenty of opportunities for the insurance company to do their dirty work. So certainly, yeah, it's not like we're just going up against nobody. With these defense attorneys, they're at least in Wisconsin, there are some very tough ones out there that make us do everything we have to do to prove our case. And that's the way the system is built, and that's the way the system should be, right? We shouldn't just be given, I prefer that our clients just are given money, but
I would love for there to be no need for us.
That'd be great. But there are some times that we have to prove the case, and that's totally fine, right? I mean, there are judges for a reason to overlook and make sure that what is being done is proper. So, I think there are some crazy things that I hear that I wouldn't expect to hear, but then once I look into it, it's like, oh, okay, I guess I'm not too surprised that this happened.
Right. Well, and two, being a plaintiff's lawyer is really, really hard, right? We have the burden of proof. We have to prove every single element of a case. We have to prove up the liability. We have to prove up all of the damages. We have to call all of the witnesses. And most times at trial, the defense doesn't call a single witness in personal injury trials. Now, when you're dealing with the bigger ones, they do. But your run-of-the-mill personal injury trial, it's nothing for a defense attorney to never call a witness. And so when I explain this to people, and my defense attorney friends agree 110%, their job is to just sit there and try to poke holes, right? Their job is to sit there and try to pick out certain things in medical records and just really harp on those, or pick out certain accident facts and just really harp on that. And so it's easier for a defense attorney to just come in and go try a case than it is for a plaintiff's attorney to put the whole thing together, make sure all your witnesses are there, people that need to be deposed are deposed, and then actually present this case. So when you see that, and then when you think about, okay, the jury is hearing all the evidence, all the testimony, and they're going back there, they don't want to look like fools, and they're coming up with this result, then I think it makes it more like, okay, you know what? Maybe I'm not getting the whole story here.
Yeah. No, I agree. There have been trials that I've had where defense counsel just seems like they didn't even know what the case was about before, a second before they walk into the courtroom. It's like, oh, this is a dog bite trial today. Okay. Or this is a car accident case. Okay. It's like, they'll just ask different questions or look at different records and, go from there. So yeah, I'm not surprised, when I have, a defense attorney who only, the only time he talks or she talks is in cross-examination. And that's it, because they're not going to call anybody else.
Yeah. I've had defense lawyers sitting there flipping through medical records during voir dire trying to figure out, okay, what could I use here?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But hey, that's all they have to do. That's all they have to do. All right. So tell me this. I love hearing good stories on this podcast. What is one of your crazier cases? You already mentioned one, the toilet paper case. What's something else that sticks out in your mind over your career that was really either difficult or satisfying win, or something with some crazy facts?
Yeah, boy, crazy facts, unusual facts. I'll say an unusual fact scenario just because it's atypical for a personal injury attorney to talk about this. But one of my first trials was an invasion of privacy case. It was a person who had some addiction issues and had taken too much alcohol with some prescription drugs, and was found by her family on the ground in her house, and the family called an ambulance. And it just so happens that the victim, she didn't pass away in that instance, thank goodness, but she was a nurse, and she specifically asked the EMTs who came not to take her to her hospital. She lived near the hospital in which she worked. So she said, "Don't take me there, take me to the other hospital across town." So the EMTs took her to the other hospital, and they were trying to keep it, private. The family wanted it to be private, because they didn't know whether it was attempted suicide or whether it was an accident or what was going on.
Sure.
They just didn't know. They were, kind of shocked. And then within a matter of minutes of her arriving, there was a deluge of phone calls to the hospital saying, "I hope she's okay. We just heard. I hope she's okay." So the EMTs went back and immediately were making phone calls to other people and telling them that she was picked up and she was taken to this hospital and that it was an attempted suicide. So that was just a fascinating case for me because I had to learn what the standards were for EMTs, which is kind of part of the fun, right? I mean, being a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer, you get to learn all these different things. If you're doing a med mal case, you get to learn the specifics of what that doctor did, or you're doing this kind of case, I got to learn what the rules were for privacy for EMTs, and I took a ton of depositions, talked to a lot of different experts about what that meant for privacy of patients when they're picked up by EMT. So that was very unique. That was a very unique trial. It was interesting. There were lots of motions because it was a case against a volunteer fire department, and then individually we had to navigate our way through that as the which insurance company, whether it was respondeat superior or whether they were acting on their own accord because they made phone calls when they were at the firehouse, which was a volunteer firehouse, and then when they were home. So all kinds of different issues, but it was lots of work. It was satisfying because the jury did the right thing and found that this person was wrong, and the judge helped us make new law in Wisconsin for patients' privacy rights. Went up on appeal, and we won that. So it was good. It was an interesting case, a fun case. Certainly not a typical personal injury case, but it was a satisfying case for us and for the family.
Yeah, making new law on your very first trial. That's something else right there.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever talked about this on the podcast. But one of the stranger fact scenarios I've had, and the liability part's not that strange. It was rear end impact. Pretty moderate. Wasn't a catastrophic rear end impact where the back of the vehicle's gone or anything like that. But a lady in the vehicle lost consciousness. Was taken to the hospital. They did, CT scans and everything, looked okay. And then all of a sudden she started having these terrible, terrible headaches, big time post-concussive symptoms. Ended up going to another hospital and essentially just lost consciousness. Nothing was wrong. The CT scan was fine. She woke back up and she couldn't speak. Her ability to speak was completely gone. And so they sent her to a speech therapist, and over time, her speech started to come back. But here's the weirdest part. She started speaking with a completely different accent.
What?
She was from a very distinct location, which has a very distinct accent. And when she started being able to speak again, she sounded like Eastern European, very Slavic. Which was totally different from her original accent. And so, obviously you can imagine the raised eyebrows you get when you bring this claim. And so the defense attorney was like, "Scott, my adjuster just doesn't buy this." And I said, "Look, it's called foreign accent syndrome. Here is the research on it. It's very rare." And he's like, "This wasn't that bad of a crash." I said, "You know what? Go depose her. Depose her." He sat there for 4.5 hours trying to get her to break or, go back to her original accent to see if she was faking the entire time. Same accent, speaking very haltingly. And we ended up, getting a really good result for her. But that's one where I had to go learn what is wrong with this lady. I saw it in one of the medical records, foreign accent syndrome, had to go do all the research on it, figure it out. And then, because I knew nobody was going to buy that. Like, unless this was a real thing, nobody was going to buy that. So we had to go find the research on it. And it was absolutely probably the strangest injuries that I've seen out of any case that we've handled in my 20-year career.
What are the Well, the damages are she speaks differently, and certainly there was problems immediately thereafter.
Mm-hmm.
But she could still, she could still speak.
She
what
could definitely speak.
What would a jury award as your compensation for your altered accent, right? I mean, how would you put together what your demand was going to be for compensation based on that?
Yeah. So a big part of it was a different accent, but it was also very halting. You could see it was really difficult for her to put these sentences together, right? So it was very difficult to communicate. The other thing was too, her family couldn't understand her very well, right? So because they spoke with a different accent too, they understand Americans fine, but this specific accent, they had a really hard time understanding. So communicating with her husband, with her kids, with others was incredibly, incredibly difficult. So you can imagine how stressful that was for her. And she also, had some mental health issues that went along with that, right? And so, especially from not knowing what on earth, not being able to speak whatsoever, and then as you start hearing your voice again, it's not your voice. Yeah. It sounds like somebody else is talking every time you open your mouth. Yeah. And so, it was really, really strange, really strange. But one thing I want to bring up with you is, you talked about these billboard lawyers and how they just had tons of cases coming in. That is very difficult as an attorney, if you have all of these cases coming in, to really be able to take that time to go learn about, toilet paper covers, right? Or whatever other issue it is, defamation or EMT liability. Makes it really hard to do that if you were just overloaded with cases. And so as a law firm owner, how do you measure the capacity of each seat in your firm?
How do we measure the capacity? So there's time on desk, I guess, so we look at, certainly time on desk. If somebody has cases that are taking too long, I guess that's the obvious answer is, well, they're probably overloaded, right? Or, there are certain things, for example, when all the medical records and bills are in, we have a department that just requests medical records and bills.
Right.
Once they come in, and we have weekly meetings we run on EOS or, traction, fireproof. There's an attorney in Michigan that
Mike
does a similar thing. But exactly. So we have weekly meetings on that. So we can kind of tell that when attorneys are not getting answers to paralegals about what X, Y, and Z medical records should be included in a demand or not included in a demand in a timely fashion. Okay, what's the cause? What's the reason behind that? Are they overloaded? So I've been trying to find that magical number for however many years. As I've been a lawyer for 24 years here. So that kind of thing. I think it depends on the person. It depends on the team. This year we have more team members than we had last year. So does that affect people's numbers and how many cases they should be able to handle? Are they working efficiently? Are they being efficient with their meetings? Using the right people? For example, we have a group called the Expert Institute that is like having a doctor down the hall, and it's expensive, but it's great to use because we can call them at any point and say, hey, can you help me find a neurologist to speak with? And they'll get a neurologist on a Zoom meeting to talk about Chiari malformation or something, to say, okay, is this something that we think is related to a crash, or are we looking at the right way? So trying to get all those resources available so our attorneys can be more efficient in the use of their time so they can help people better. That's something that's really the challenge. And then maximize the recovery for every client. So how do we find it? I think it's a matter of being efficient in our time with our staff and our team and making sure that everybody is in the right seat. We want paralegals doing paralegal work. I don't want my paralegals doing medical record retrieval work. There are people who we have just requesting medical records. That's what they should do. I know a paralegal can do medical records retrieval, but a paralegal should be doing paralegal work, those kind of things.
Yeah. Well, hey, I can save you some money, Jon. The Chiari malformations are never, ever, ever due to trauma. That's what every single adjuster has always told me.
We have a case now. I have two surgeons, two neurosurgeons who say this KRI malformation was caused by this crash, and there's no pre-existing problems. And we were just in front of a judge 2 weeks ago about this, and it's driving me crazy because the defense attorney just doesn't understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, you're looking at time on desk. You're looking at how long is it before attorneys are getting paralegals this information. I think one of the things as we've grown as a law firm that has helped us tremendously, we're an EOS firm too, is the data, right? Having the systems to track the data, having the task flows where you're entering data at certain points in the case, and being able to run these various reports. That has made running a law firm as more efficiently, ensuring that we have the right people in the right seats, and then also that everybody is performing their very best. And so at what point did you really start tracking this data? Was it when you implemented EOS? Was it from the very beginning? You kind of knew that was something you needed to do?
2017.
All right, I like it. Very specific.
Because we started using FileVine, so our case management system is FileVine. And once we started using FileVine, then we realized, okay, now we can really track it. And I don't know why it was 2017, other than we were looking for a new case management system.
Yeah.
And the one that we had was server based, and I knew that I wanted to go in the cloud. I had been on some committees here at the State Bar of Wisconsin and had some general understanding of technology, and knew that was being server based and terrestrial wasn't the way to go. We needed to move to the future, and luckily we were fully in the cloud before the pandemic hit, so the pandemic didn't really affect us that much when it came to productivity.
Right.
But that's kind of where it started. Is that I believe I had joined PILMA, Ken Hardison's group.
Yeah.
And he's big into tracking numbers, and I think that probably was where it came about, was knowing your numbers, knowing your firm, working on your business as opposed to in your business. There's one thing to be a lawyer and work on cases. It's another to be a lawyer, law firm owner, the CEO of a business, working on the business and working on cases. So that's where I think I made that mental shift in the mid 2000 teens, and that's where we got it today. And now I've been with FileVine for, I guess I'm one of the OGs of FileVine.
I was about to say
7-8 years approximately. I was at their conference last a month or two ago, and was talking to some of the founders, to Ryan and Nathan, and it's kind of shocking that I've been around with them for so long, and we were talking about all these different people that I have met with over the years as they've grown grown FileVine. FileVine's kind of a crazy, huge business now, but I remember back when it was just a few of them, and they were flying out to Milwaukee to meet with me. Just kind of crazy, because I wasn't that big of a deal, but they were that interested in growing their business, that they were really helping me make sure that we had a good customer experience, and that we could do the right things with FileVine, so we could do the right things for our clients.
Yeah, so you were a very early adopter. I was 2018. That's when we signed on, and it was me and a paralegal. And I knew the need that we had for the case management system. I love the fact that it was cloud-based. Love the fact that you could create the reports so easily and update the task flows. There's a lot of, you don't have to go ask somebody to change things for you. You can change it yourself. So that was huge for us, especially obviously, as you mentioned, for the pandemic. And so going back to when you first started your firm, how did you, I guess at what point did you go from kind of the solo to growth mindset, Jon, of, all right, it's time to start bringing on team members. Here's what I want this thing to look like as we move forward?
Yeah. So I started this practice in 2010, March 1st of 2010. I was the the trial lawyer. I was the youngest, so I was the trial lawyer for one of the bigger personal injury firms here in Milwaukee, and left them. Started this March 1st in my basement. My kids were running on our wood floor above me. My dog was barking, and I'm trying to pretend like I'm a real lawyer with a real law firm. I had about 30 cases, and I was sending like little flyers out to different lawyers. I don't have an example here, but I sent postcards out and little flyers out to lawyers all across Wisconsin saying, "I'll be your trial lawyer. You call me with 5 weeks notice and I'll try the case for you." That kind of thing. So I would be, in essence, just a hired gun to come anywhere in Wisconsin and take the case and run to trial. And that worked. And I was getting a bunch of referrals, and then a bunch more referrals. And then within really the first 6 months, I realized 30 cases was 60 and 90 and 100 plus. And then we needed to start hiring people. And it was a wild ride for a few years. And then finally we realized, okay, now we have to look at this differently, because this is a bigger enterprise than I thought it was going to be. And that's when, in about mid to 20 or 20 teens, we really looked at having an office manager, having paralegals dedicated, having different teams, and working on the business in that fashion. And it took a while, because it's a big mindset shift, right? I mean,
Huge.
You have to look at being a trial lawyer and handling all the cases and knowing that I can do everything, to okay, well, no, I have to give away that responsibility and somebody else can do it, and try not to micromanage, even though it's very, very difficult not to micromanage, because with experience comes maybe the desire to micromanage, because you can do it better than anybody else, but you have to trust and verify that somebody else can do the job and train them and help them succeed in their goals. So, long story short, it took a while, but we've had exponential growth these past few years, where now we have 4 VAs in the Philippines and 4 VAs in Mexico, and staff that are working remotely from other states. And we have different departments in the firm. We have attorneys that just do vaccine law.
Mm-hmm.
We purchased another law firm a couple of years ago, so we bought Samster, Conkle, and Safran. It's really, since the pandemic, since 2020 approximately, we've really grown exponentially, which is great. But then that puts me in a different perspective, right? I have to look at different things and do different things.
Absolutely. So you're familiar with the concept of delegate and elevate through
Yep.
EOS. What has been the hardest thing for you to delegate?
Oh, the hardest thing, probably the marketing aspect. And it's because I like it. So that's I really enjoy it. So
Right.
It's hard to give away that to somebody else, when it's like, well, I like to do that a lot more. But one of my first bosses say that you have to do the worst first. So in the beginning of the day, I am doing things that I have learned that I have to do to get it over with, and then I can go and do other things. And I try to delegate the marketing, because it's a time suck. I enjoy doing it, but there are other more important things that aren't as urgent that need to get done. So,
yeah, I think especially the things that you enjoy doing, right? Those are always the hardest. That, or like the super important things that you just can't let get messed up, but is also kind of below the things that you need to be working on. Those are equally as difficult to give up, because that comes with a lot of anxiety. And the stuff that you're good at, but somebody else is better, that doesn't really come with anxiety. It's the stuff that just can't get messed up, but you got to pass it off, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about your vision for the future. What is Groth Law going to look like 10 years from now?
Boy, 10 years from now, I'm looking at 5 years from now. 10
there
years
you go.
from now.
Five is fine. 5 is fine.
Yeah. We're looking at, I think this time of year, we're in kind of the planning mode for next year. So it goes back to that existential kind of conversation that I have in my head with my growth mindset or kind of self. Do we stay where we're at, or do we continue to grow? And this is something that my wife and I were talking about last night. That I think the reality is, I don't think I would be happy unless we're expanding and we're growing the firm and seeing what potential, seeing what we can do. I talk with my kids about keeping doors open, making sure that we always do your best and study your hardest, or don't close doors with relationships or opportunities. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, that I think 5 years from now, it's a matter of having different departments. If it's the vaccine practice that has more lawyers, if it's different aspects of personal injury, we are looking at different offices across the state. We currently have an office in Green Bay and a couple offices in the Milwaukee area. Are we expanding west? We've talked to other lawyers about purchasing other law firms. So I think it simply is a matter of expanding, and the extent of the expansion is really the $1 million question. So in 5 years, where are we? We're a bigger firm, more lawyers, more staff, and probably expanding into some not only other areas of the state, but other states.
All right. As a law firm owner, what has been one of the most difficult challenges that you've had to face and overcome?
Boy, difficult challenges. I would say just trusting the process. Just simply trusting, knowing that, okay, we have cases, we're going to be okay, because by helping people, we're going to not only help them, but we'll be able to make money to pay the mortgage and send my kids to college, things like that. So, and trusting that it's going to work out. That's something that, looking back 14 years ago now, from day one of Groth Law Firm, I didn't know we'd be here. I never imagined we'd be where we are right now. And I wish I could just tell that young guy that it's going to be okay. There were a lot of sleepless nights, but
oh yeah,
it's things like that. If you're trying to promote people internally or have a tough conversation with somebody you have to fire, for example, or whatever, crucial conversations. It was recommended to me by our business coach last week, and so far it's really interesting. So crucial conversations I'd recommend. I got to say, traction. I want to say I'm addicted to traction, but now I'm addicted to traction. I'll admit.
Right.
I have a bunch of the traction books. What the heck is EOS? How to be a good boss, traction, all those things. And then my last one is, John Morgan, love him or hate him. He has You Can't Teach Vision, You Can't Teach Hungry, I think are the two books.
Yeah. Yep.
I have that in my backpack over there, that I'm going to take up to our cabin this weekend and start reading again for probably the 10th time. It's a really quick read, but it's a really good book. So those three are the ones that I'm kind of looking at this point.
Awesome. Well, Jon, thank you so much for your time. It has been a pleasure getting to speak with you. And thank you to everyone for tuning in to another episode of the Driven Crowd podcast. We'll talk to you next time.